Oh, this is Randy. I'd like to welcome you again to Brain Break with Randy and Keitho. I wanted to tell you a story that had a great impact on my life. Hopefully, you'll have something like it in yours, but you may not. I grew up in a family where it was my dad's family. I grew up in a small town in Utah, Panguitch, and later moved to Gunnison. My grandfather was not active with the family or in the church. He was sober. He ran movie theaters. When he wasn't, he lived in a bottle. I never even knew I had a grandfather until after he passed when I was about 12. And I found out from my older cousins that when I turned 18, it would become my responsibility to help care for him as it had become theirs. I did notice that when we would go to see my grandparents, my mother's parents, my dad would disappear always for 1 to 2, sometimes 3 days. Didn't question it. In my day, we didn't question adults. Found out later that he was going to find his father, make sure that he had food in the house, and then he would feed him for a few days and try and keep him off of liquor. He felt he had established that. Else could check up on him in a few days. My father would come back and be with us, his current family. My aunt, his sister, his closest sister, was quite the genealogist. My last name is MacIff. That's my adopted last name. Was adopted. My mother always told me that his name was Scotch-Irish. It wasn't until later I found out our name was actually Swiss. Changed at Ellis Island when his father and I guess it would be his uncle, my father's uncle, came over from England on a ship. It landed at Ellis Island. And basically, this whole ship had all filled with Scotch-Irish people, and everybody's name was either Mac, C, or Mick, or Mac, which is the M with a C underlined, which is what I have in my name. So my aunt finally was able to do some genealogy and find out about where all this happened from. It was exciting. And we got, I don't know how many lines that go clear back to Adam, but a lot. And, all that takes really is when you take a line far enough back that you're able to trace to royalty, and there you can figure out what is going to happen next. His royalties genealogy always goes back to Adam for some reason. Anyway, one night, my wife and I were living in El Paso, Texas. And we were fairly newlyweds. We had a baby that was 2-ish. So we'd probably been married 3 years or so. And woke up wide awake about 2 o'clock in the morning. And I had a desire to look at what we called my book of remembrance. And at the time, everybody had a book of remembrance. It was a big book filled with your genealogy. And now we do that online. But at the time, everything was written out by hand. It wasn't even printed out. It was written by hand. Aunt had helped put mine together for me. My brother had one that was exactly alike, and as well as my sisters and brothers. It was interesting, but for some reason I was drawn to this book, getting up in the middle of the night, talking, o'clock in the morning. It was not time to get up yet. I don't sleep very much back then, but I needed to get some rest. But anyway, I got this book out and I sat on the couch out in the living room and I went through it. Next day for lunch, I went to El Paso's Genealogical Library, which was in the other stake center, through what they had, and they showed me what they could do. It's interesting. I had them order some microfiche for me, which was basically where they could take a lot of records and put them on a small card or a roll of tape. And quickly found out that they weren't going to be much help. But the good thing was I was going up to Utah with my family, take my wife to her family reunion. Now I got up there and my wife's grandfather was a pretty good genealogist. So I started talking to him about this desire I had, and he was really helpful. He took me to the Ogden Genealogical Library. And after 2 afternoons with them, they basically said, we can't help you. You need to go to Salt Lake. And, Ogden and Salt Lake, an hour apart. So I headed down there the next day. Just as they were telling me there was nothing they could do for me, this gentleman came in. He was a unique gentleman because he'd been a missionary in Germany. My wife's grandfather had been a missionary in Austria. But the difference was is this man had learned Old German. He was able to go through the original records for my grandfather's family. And between the two of us, we found there was a mistake. That was that my great-great-grandfather had been sealed to his sister, not his wife. So I got all the documentation. This gentleman was amazing and wonderful to help me. And I went back and I showed my wife, and I had no more concern about genealogy. Didn't think anything about it, but on the way home, we were going to stop and see this favorite aunt, Mildred. We played with the kids. She was amazing, entertained them, made games for them to play. As they were asleep and calm, I pulled out my book of remembrance and showed my aunt what I had discovered. And my aunt and my uncle both started crying. You know what I said? It turns out that about the same time that I got the genealogy book, my aunt, who had received a heavenly visitor right after she was married, after World War II, and they were going to Utah State University. And my aunt had this visitor who had appeared to her 3 times and said, "Mildred, you must help John. This is Elizabeth." The message made no sense to her. She didn't know who John was, and she didn't know who Elizabeth was. But as she did the genealogy, she realized that John was married to Elizabeth and even had been sealed in the temple to Elizabeth. The situation was that Elizabeth was his sister, not his wife. That's what I showed her. And she was crying because right about the time that I got bit by the genealogy bug, she had basically begged Heavenly Father to release her from this opportunity to serve her family because she couldn't do it. She had never been able to find a solution and felt like it was time for somebody else to do it. She was getting up in years and that old, probably my age now. But anyway, she had asked for this release, if you will, and right about the same time as when I got the genealogy book. And I guess what I would say is don't ignore those thoughts or impressions. They won't keep coming. They'll only come a few times, and then they may go to somebody else. And I'm so glad I didn't let one of my other cousins have this opportunity. And I feel extremely blessed that I was able to help out my great-great-grandfather and his beautiful wife to get them sealed. Now, if you look up genealogy for my family, you will find out that he's still sealed to his sister, Elizabeth, but he's also sealed to his wife. And we feel that all of these things will get straightened out during the millennium. But I want you to know that I appreciate you letting me tell you this story. It's near and dear to my heart, and yet I feel someone out there needs to hear it. And with that, thank you for your time. Please like and subscribe. Tell your friends about us. We would love to have more people watching Brain Break with Randy and Keitho. Have a great night. Take care.